I'd like to welcome everyone properly and formally to joining us tonight to help us celebrate 5 years of Hello World.
Yay!
Thank you, Alan, for the fanfare.
Years.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be sharing and celebrating this with everyone. Let's get started. Okay, cool. So, I'm James Robinson. I work for the Raspberry Pi Foundation as a Senior Learning Manager and work quite closely on the Hello World product and the work that we do supporting our community around the world. So I'm going to introduce some guests in a moment, but I'm just going to start off by, for those that aren't familiar, just introducing what Hello World is and why it's so important to us at the Raspberry Pi Foundation and our mission. So Hello World for us is it's a community that provides support for computing and digital making educators all over the world, and we want to help you find inspiration to share experiences and to learn from each other. So we want to connect other educators but also connect with them ourselves who are working either inside or outside the classroom. And this work that we began sort of started 5 years ago, a couple of months ago, in this term, 5 years ago, when we launched Hello World magazine. And to tell us a bit more about Hello World magazine, I'm going to introduce my fantastic co-host Gemma, who is also, well, in fact, I'll let you introduce yourself, Gemma, rather than spoiling all of that. Off you go, Gemma.
Thank you, James. Yeah, no spoilers. So yes, hi everyone who's here this evening. I'm Gemma. I'm the editor of Hello World magazine, and yeah, I'm thrilled to be celebrating Hello World's 5th birthday. Yes, I started as the editor about a year ago, but I have been reading Hello World for a very long time. So when the Raspberry Pi Foundation launched Hello World, the strapline, the magazine by computing educators for computing educators was chosen, and that is still very much the ethos of Hello World today. So yes, I'm sure all of you here know the magazine comes out a few times a year, and it's stuffed full of articles and lesson plans, research pieces, news stories about the teaching and learning of computer science, and it's all written by amazing educators like you guys, like our listeners. So just a quick one, so I don't forget later on. The issues that we've got coming out this year, we've got a wonderful issue on cybersecurity coming out next month, which we're really excited to share with you because it's such a popular theme. And we've got 2 more issues after that for 2022. So one's going to be themed around computing and sustainability, and the other one will be about all things networking. So do get in touch at helloworld.cc/write for us if you'd like to get involved. But yes, beyond the magazine, Hello World has, more importantly, as James has said, developed into a support system and a community of over 30,000 subscribers in 176 countries, which is a ridiculous statistic. And yes, we've grown up a lot over these last 5 years to include more fantastic resources, which I'm going to let James introduce very briefly now before we open up to talking to our listeners.
Yeah, we've got some fantastic guests, and Alan's already kind of chipped in a little bit, but I'll properly introduce Alan in just a moment. And we've also got Catherine Elliott joining us today to talk a bit about their experience of writing for Hello World. But as Gemma was saying, We've moved beyond just a magazine, which is still, the core part of what we do through Hello World, but we've also expanded what we do in terms of we regularly kind of refeature lots of our content through the blog. We've last year launched a podcast, which is proving really popular around the world, similarly to the magazine. And most recently, you may have seen, and if you haven't, where have you been? Our big book of computing pedagogy, which I'm holding up to my camera at my computer, but none of you can see that, so I don't know what I'm doing. But it's never far from my side. This is a compilation of our kind of greatest hits, our thinking around pedagogy and practice for computing and computer science. So yeah, and we're going to continue to expand that content and do more. And before we kind of delve too much into the conversations with our guests, I just want to spend a really brief moment thanking a lot of people for all the work that's brought us to where we are. And that really kind of is the contributors out there who are writing content, such as Alan and Catherine and Neil, who has already spoken this evening. But also our people that help us sponsor and pay for the magazine. We publish this magazine for free for educators. Obviously, that costs us money, and we've been lucky to have lots of support from people like BT, who supported a number of issues in the early days, and more recently Oracle, who've supported 4 issues in recent times, and have been really fantastic advocates of the work that we're doing. And finally, really importantly, most importantly, are you, our readers and subscribers to the magazine. We really want to thank you and praise you for your support and continuing interest in the work that we're doing. So, if you're just joining us, we've been talking now for about 5 minutes. We're just introducing tonight's session. And now's an opportunity to throw the microphone over to you. And I'm really hoping that we've got people that are feeling brave enough and enthusiastic enough to tell us a little bit about their experience of Hello World. So I'm going to open the floor with a question, which is, I'm really interested in which parts of that Hello World offer that we've talked about have our listeners used? Have you read the magazine? Have you subscribed to the podcast? Do you have a copy of the Big Book of Pedagogy?
So when I before I started working for the foundation, I was a keen reader of Hello World, and I think the things that I really first kind of like gripped me about the magazine was two things. I really enjoyed reading just people testing things out in the classroom and seeing what kind of things they were doing and talk about what worked for them, and that was kind of a nice to inspire me to have a go at doing it as well. But also the kind of like the little articles about pedagogy. And it's the same kind of principle of things, easy things that you can just pick up and use in the classroom, even the next day and see how it works out for you. But those things to know that they're backed up by research was always really comforting for me. So it was less of a stab in the dark to have a go at things. It was based on like research. So that's nice. And obviously that feeds into the Big Book of Pedagogy, which is full of that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what first got me into the magazine.
Thanks, Ben. It's really good to hear your feedback. And I think there's a few people that are maybe trying to kind of request microphone access.
I was going to just pick up on what Ben said, that I think that's the thing that seems to resonate with readers so much is, hearing from other people's practice and what they've tried out in their classroom, tried and tested. And that doesn't mean that something was necessarily a success. It's also really interesting to read articles about when, something just went wrong and what you learned from it, and I think it's that aspect of community that's so wonderful about Hello World. We all know that compared to more traditional, I'm sort of doing air quotation marks here, subjects like English and maths, finding resources and fellow computing teachers can be so tricky. And I've spent time talking to teachers around the world where there was actually one case where one teacher I spoke to was the only computer science teacher for a particular exam board in their entire country, which is obviously quite extreme. But, we know that computing is a much smaller and less well-resourced subject on the whole. So being able to read Hello World and hear about what people are trying out is so valuable for a subject like computing particularly.
Hi, everyone. I was just going to share and say the Hello World magazine is just a nice feature in my classroom, where everything is becoming digital. To have something that is printed and of good quality is good. How I use the magazine is just trying to keep up with what everyone else is doing. And I quite like the example lessons. They're just really like brief snippets, and just looking at them can give you some ideas of how to just rejig your scheme of work and find interesting and new ways of teaching topics. That's my contribution for now.
No, that's really great to hear, Alice. Thank you for finding that button and sharing your reflection with us. I was going to build a little bit on what Gemma was saying. I think that's one of the experiences as a computing teacher is that it can feel quite isolating sometimes. And I don't know if that's something that other people that are joining us kind of perhaps experience or can relate to, but maybe a little emoticon or a wave would kind of give us a sense of who else maybe kind of feels that sometimes in the classroom, that you can feel quite separated from other educators that are working in the same field. And so I think one of the things that Hello World does, and we try to do well, is provide sort of just contact, even if it's sort of vicariously, you're not speaking to people directly, but the idea that there are other people out there doing the same thing, having the same challenges, and who are excited about the subject as much as you are. Neil, I can see you kind of trying to speak, I think.
Yeah, I was trying really hard. There's something else that sort of met the accessibility, I think, on the research side, to see something that is often quite complex put onto two sides of A4, often with a nice diagram or a graph, means that you can understand it more easily, but also then implement it practically in the classroom. Remember, one that I still quite often refer to, remember Jane Waite had a really nice graph that looked at the motivation of boys and girls based on different approaches to teaching programming. And it very clearly showed why you don't use certain approaches in the classroom and actually what's better. And I think the inclusion of those kind of articles is really useful. Thanks,
Neil. That's a really nice reflection. I think you're specifically referring to maybe some content there in the big book as well, aren't you? I think that's where we do some of those summaries. I can see lots of people are kind of joining us and dipping in and out. I think just to kind of recap where we're up to, I'm going to move over and we're going to introduce our first guest in just a moment. But welcome if you're just joining us. I can see a few people are joining us from other parts of the world. I can see Amanda's joining us from the States. Yeah, so we've just been hearing a little bit about people's experiences, thanks Amanda, of Hello World and how they use it in their classroom. And now I'm going to move on and I'm going to introduce our first guest, who I've known for a very long time, who was there at the start when we kicked off Hello World and we launched it. You might remember being in the Bet Arena here in the UK, Alan, and we made a big fuss about Hello World and launched it all those years ago. And you've been writing for Hello World for a long time. So, Alan, do you want to just spend a moment introducing yourself? And then I've got a few questions that I'd really like to put to you. And equally, if anyone in the audience wants to ask Alan a question, again, you can request the microphone and you can put a question to Alan. So, Alan, who are you? Tell our audience.
Well, I still class myself as a teacher. Started teaching in the 1990s, but as a DT teacher. And then started teaching computing in 2007. It was lonely, like you said. And the thing is, well, when you're doing it on your own, it's like, am I doing the right thing? I really, really wished I'd had something like Hello World back in the beginning. I am a huge fan of the magazine. And I remember I didn't know it was being launched in 2017, January. I just found out. Miles said, oh, by the way, we're launching this magazine today. Can you come along? I was like, what? And it's absolutely fantastic. I really, really love the magazine. And I think what I'm trying to do is trying to imagine if back in 2007, I'd had a magazine, what would it have looked like? And Hello World is exactly what I think I could have done with back then.
I was going to say, I'm glad that we were able to fulfill that kind of that retrospective imagination of a magazine that, yeah, I think that's really great. And you know, you've written for the magazine for quite some time now. What is the column that you write? What's the motivation behind your column? Tell people who maybe haven't read the magazine a bit about the column that you write for us.
Well, I used to say to people, it was a joke that I felt like I was the only computing teacher in the village, because it was a line from a comedy thing on TV at the time. And it is, you know, I'd have colleagues in school who were in the science department. There'd be 6 or 7 of them. They could all like bounce ideas off each other. And here I was on my own. So the article, the column or whatever you call it, the Piers in the magazine, it's an insider's guide. It's a, you know, have you ever struggled with a particular problem? This article should help you. So it's not the things you would necessarily learn on a university course or as part of your teaching practice. So it could be like, what are we going to do for open night? Oh gosh, open night. Oh no. We know that teachers are among the busiest people that there are. And we want to do cool and inspired and amazing things. But when we've got a huge workload behind us and we've got all these things that we have to do, and then someone says, do something really cool, that's really hard. So these articles, I've been a bit cheeky. I've gotten around and asked. I have lots of friends who are teachers. What do you do for open night? And what do you do? And I've put them all together in each of these guides. So they're not just open night. Classroom displays, love them or hate them. There's a Hello World article all about classroom displays. Setting homework. Little secret, I never did any homework as a child. Honestly, I never, ever did. But as a teacher, I had to set homework. How can you set homework that's meaningful and interesting? Well, there's a guide on that.
Yeah, but I was just going to say because I obviously work very closely with your wonderful articles, Alan. And my favourite one that I've had the pleasure of editing was the last one you did for around planning for teacher absences, because I think that is something that, as you say, it's not something you necessarily learn about, you know, the best ways to handle something like that, because it's it's almost a worst case scenario. And I think you always do a very a very good job of making your articles as practical as possible. And like you say, you've drawn on so many case studies from fellow computing teachers, and I think that's what makes it so useful, because you're getting tips from the best of the best, aren't you? Well, that's what I take away from your column anyway.
Well, thank you. I mean, the article, it starts off one morning. It was actually on a Sunday night. I got a phone call from the head teacher at our school to say, "Listen, Alan, terrible news. Your colleague has died." And It all just came as a complete shock. And like, you're dealing with all of that, and then what work are we going to set for his classes? Oh my gosh. And suddenly, and I'm trying to, I would not wish that kind of situation on anybody, but having been there, we know what worked, and here's some advice on that. Don't be under any illusions. There's a lot of research that's been taken, a lot of people involved in, sound, pedagogical research about what works and what doesn't work. These are more of somebody asks you to do this job in school, like put up a classroom display, and it does. It says like, well, there's actually no research that says classroom displays have any effects. So here, go away to your colleague and show them this, or if you just want to have some fun, here's some solutions you can use as well.
I think that's a really important aspect that I think often isn't, as we've sort of said, it isn't covered in like, a lot of the sort of the teacher training guidance or other sort of content around that is like, once you've lived the job of being a teacher, there are so many little things like that have an impact on your day that are beyond teaching and learning, but you can kind of bring your understanding of computing to, and I think that's really important. Gemma mentioned one of her favourite pieces. So my question, Alan, is what is your favourite piece that you've written? Is my penultimate question to you, I think.
I'm sorry, James, but I absolutely refuse to answer that question. I've got here. People want to see. I'm holding up 17 issues of Hello World, and each one has got 100 pages in. Now, I haven't weighed it. It must weigh about 3 or 4 kilos, and I would say that's about 1,700 pages of content for computing teachers. And okay, 1 or 2 of those pages are adverts. There's also, in each of these magazines, there are 30 contributors, and I can pick up any one of these magazines at any point, and I can go, now, do you know, I'd even forgotten the article was in there. Clockwork coding. Who's written this? Oh, so there's loads of people, there's friends out there. You can get loads of advice. You can get loads of ideas. And it is like watching a film from years ago. It's worth going back to those older issues and seeing what's there.
That's yeah. I mean, it's really good. For those, obviously many people can't see you, Alan, but I'm watching Alan kind of do his own little home workout, lifting these magazines up and down, and they are substantially weighty.
There was something else I was hoping to say, but I mean, you can always mute me if need be. I love using technology when it's appropriate, of course. But it's very, very nice to have a paper copy of the magazine. And I know it's not necessarily a very popular thing to do. Trees have to be cut down from forests and all of this. But when you go on your technology and you go and download the digital version of the magazine, you're probably going to find lots of other things are competing on your screen for your attention at the same time. But to be able to pick a magazine up or even print an article out and sit somewhere with a coffee, it's a great way of accessing CPD from your shelf.
Alan, you're going to make our international listeners very, very jealous, because
they can print copies out. It's all Creative Commons as well.
That's the wonderful thing, is obviously everyone can get it for free as a PDF, but this is a great opportunity. So if you go to helloworld.cc/buy, you might be able to get it shipped to your country if you are really itching for a print copy. So just a little plug there.
Thanks. I can see that Carrie Ann is on the call, and I think she's got her hand up. There's definitely a kind of a gesture going on there. So I think I'm going to see if Carrie Ann wants to kind of chip in there. Carrie Ann?
Yeah, hi James. Hi everybody. Hope you can hear me. Give a holler if you can.
We can.
I just had a question for Alan. And that question is, when you see your contributions printed, in the magazine, when the magazine for you lands on your doorstep, like how does that make you feel? And like what are the emotions? How does it make you feel to see yourself in print and in the magazine that you enjoy so much?
Absolutely, really proud, delighted. And in the latest version of the magazine as well, I asked some other authors what did they feel? And it's elation. It is so nice to see, and to be able to go to colleagues and say, look, that thing I mentioned and I asked you for some advice. Here it is. It's in print. So, yeah, I would absolutely encourage anybody to consider. There's a lot of this sort of imposter syndrome, isn't there, where people think, oh, well, nobody would want to read what I've got to say, or I'm not doing anything special in my classroom. And people just don't really understand the value of what they're doing and how much other people want to read that.
And I think going back to what we were saying early on about that kind of isolation that teachers often feel, like just you putting pen to paper and sharing your experience, even if what you're sharing you don't think is particularly revolutionary or world-changing, just hearing somebody else's experience can be really, really valuable. And those, if you've taken inspiration from another teacher, you can do the same thing for somebody else in the community by writing something. I can see that Yolanda is on the call as well, and she's waving her hand. So Yolanda, do you want to chip in? Is it a question, a comment? What do you want to add?
So a couple of comments, a couple of co-signing on several things. Gemma, yes, I am absolutely jealous that Hello World does not come to my doorstep. So that's number one, unless you guys send it to me. Number two, Alan, you are so correct on the paper copies. Like everything you're saying, I'm like, yes. But I didn't want to interrupt because I was too busy nodding my head in agreement. But it is, computing can be super isolating, especially here in the States where we still have states that are just starting their programs. And so, I'm going to be a big advocate that in the next 5 years, we figure out how to get Hello World printed over here. So you guys hear that here first. But just wanted to make those quick comments.
And we really value those comments. Thank you, Yolanda. And we absolutely would love to be doing a bit more in terms of print over there and be able to give you that copy in print. And it's it's nice to hear from someone who isn't in the UK and is sort of getting Hello World in maybe a different context. If we've got any other international guests or listeners with us on the call, feel free to tell us what it's like receiving Hello World or digitally in another part of the world where and hearing from educators that are in different sort of contexts. I'm gonna we might move on and move to our next guest in just a moment, but I'm gonna ask you one final question, Alan, before we kind of have a pause for some audience engagement. What's something that you would love to write about that you haven't written about yet?
Okay, so I think I have a list of a big list that I need to share with Gemma at some point. But it's the things that teachers ask all the time, like, "Oh my gosh, options evening! It's next week. How does that just suddenly landed on us?" So options evening. Oh, I get to visit lots of teachers in their classrooms. Furniture arrangements. Have everybody facing the front. Have everybody facing away from you so you can see their screens. How do you arrange your classroom? Open source software. Why do we need to buy all of this expensive software when there's lots of open source software that's out there that's pretty good? Lots of people suggested, we should do an article about book clubs, teachers sharing books, students. How about preparing for a teacher interview? You're going for a job and they ask you to teach a lesson. Ooh. I've got more.
Yeah, well, so I asked for one. I think that was 5. I think I counted.
Sorry.
No. I think it's great. I think these are all really valuable ideas, and I think those kind of contributions. One of the things we get asked quite a bit in the UK and some of our other work is about preparing for Ofsted. Now, those who are outside of a UK context, Ofsted are the inspectorate body that come in and sort of evaluate the quality of your education in your school, and it can fill teachers with dread. And I'm sure there's equivalents all over the world. But yeah, lots of teachers are kind of a bit more minded to that, thinking about what that looks like now. We kind of get back more to sort of face-to-face education. So yeah, that would be an interesting one as well. I'm going to pause and I'm just going to kind of spend a moment just seeing if there's anyone else in our audience who would like to pose a question to Alan. Is there anything you'd like to ask him? Do you have any topics that you would like for him to write about?
Would it be okay if I just mention something as well? So there's in the next issue of Hello World, the article that I've contributed to this time is all about how to make the most of it. And while I was asking teachers, what should the article contain, I was surprised by how many were saying, "Oh, I don't receive Hello World anymore, and I used to. I used to get it, and I think some people forgot or missed the fact that back in, was it May or April last year, there was a request for people to resubscribe. And it's possible that some of tonight's listeners might be going, oh gosh, that's why I don't get it anymore, because they need to resubscribe again.
That's a really good point. Gemma, do you want to talk a little bit about what people can do if they haven't been receiving the magazine and why they need to resubscribe?
Yeah, so this is mainly for, this is for educators who are based in the UK and who get a print subscription. We basically just wanted to make sure that the magazines we were sending out were still going to the correct addresses, and that the people were still teaching and still wanting the magazine. So we did a little unsubscribe and then a resubscribe, which was asking you guys to resubscribe to the print copy if you wanted that. So if you're not currently getting the print magazine in the UK and you do want that, if you head to helloworld.cc/subscribe, you can then create an account and you can manage your subscription options there to make sure that you're not missing out. Carrie-Anne, you've got your hand up. Would you like to?
I just wanted to add that by creating an account, you can keep your details up to date. So if you get your print copy sent to your school and you change schools, and you can always log back in and update those details, or if you move house, and we would really recommend that you do that. We print this magazine for free for UK teachers. It's free to you, the teacher, the end user, but obviously it costs the Raspberry Pi Foundation a certain amount of money. So when we get copies sent back to us, that makes us very sad. And we have a little sad party where we get really sad about the numbers that come back to us. So really it's about giving the users, you guys who want the subscription, the opportunity to update that subscription and make sure we get it sent to you, so it's as useful to you as possible. And again, for Yolanda and other people around the world, we are sorry that we are only able to print it here in the UK, but I think Alan has given some great suggestions around printing your PDF copy. I think that's such a great suggestion.
And I would say, as a very, a little incentive, we do send out a print copy of, if you contribute to the magazine, we will send you a copy of that issue that you appear in to say a big thank you to you. So a little incentive if you're abroad. Write for us and you'll get a copy of that issue. James, do you think we're ready to introduce Catherine now?
Yes, absolutely. I was going to say, do you want to pick up the conversation now and introduce our second guest, Catherine?
Yes, so, I can see Catherine, nobody else can see Catherine, but yes, we're going to hear a little bit now from Catherine Elliott. So welcome, Catherine. Would you like to introduce yourself, introduce what you do, and a little bit about the column that you write?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Hopefully it sounds all right. I'm Catherine Elliott. I work in Sheffield supporting schools with the use of technology, so mainly around the computing curriculum. And anybody who knows me knows that my passion is absolutely about inclusion and supporting learners with special educational needs and disabilities to access computing, because everyone should have, that opportunity. And so the column that I write is called The Inclusive Classroom. And I mean, it's mainly centered around how we can support teachers to create a more inclusive environment in the classroom, which will include and engage all of those kind of learners with specific learning difficulties or sensory difficulties or disabilities. But actually, it becomes then a more inclusive classroom for every type of learner.
Yeah, it's a wonderful column, and I think it's actually the one that's coming up. So I shouldn't give too many spoilers, but I think what I have particularly enjoyed about the last column of yours that I was editing was how you talk about really playing to the strengths of those learners. So it's not just about how you can adapt your sort of learning to really help support those learners. It's also really about playing to their strengths and making it, just making it a more varied kind of learning experience for everyone. I think that's what I've really enjoyed about your
Absolutely, and I think that's a really important thing to kind of emphasise, really, is that we have such diverse learners in our classrooms, and regardless of the barriers they face, they all bring something to that classroom, and they all have their own individual strengths and interests and personality. And to be truly inclusive, you know, we need to get everyone involved and engaged and feel like they have that sense of belonging in that classroom and learn from all of those strengths that are there. So yeah, I think it's very easy to sometimes think about the barriers and the difficulties, but actually, you know, there's many positives to be taken as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, you've obviously been writing for Hello World. I think your first column was issue 12, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what motivates you to write for Hello World? You're obviously, you know, a very busy person. So what is it that keeps you coming back each issue to write for?
It's a very good question, because every time I get the deadline, I think, oh, are we there again? Okay, I have to come up with something to write about. But there's always something to write about. And anyone who knows me, I mean, I could talk all day on this, because it's so interesting and I'm so passionate about it, and it's so incredibly important. And what I love about Hello World is it gives me an audience for my ramblings, and hopefully people, you know, read it and get something out of it. And it's so wonderful to have that opportunity to talk to educators, not just in this country, but you know, all around the world, and that's fantastic. So everybody should be developing inclusivity in their classroom. So yeah, you know, thanks for letting me have a mouthpiece.
Well, yes, and I definitely think, you know, we know how many people are reading your column and taking away really practical advice. It's actually, you know, because we obviously have the podcast that goes with the magazine, and the episode that was focusing on inclusion is one of the most popular episodes that we've had, you know, one of the most downloads, so if not the most, definitely in the top two. So, you know, it's obviously something that people want to hear a lot more from, and I think it's again that thing around you know, being, as Alan said, being the only computing teacher in the village. I guess this is even, you know, more of a kind of thing that can be quite isolating, is perhaps not knowing you know, what you could do to make your computing classroom more accessible, because it might be quite specialist in some ways in terms of, you know, technologies that you have to be using. And yeah, so I just want to say that I think you know, inclusion is clearly a topic that is you know, very, very important to our readers and listeners, and perhaps yes, some of those would like to chip in now and let us know their thoughts. So
I did, but I was just going to chip in with the podcast stat that you shared. You beat me to it. It was a really good episode to record, and as you say, it does really well. I think we would just reflect. We've got Kat and Amanda who are around and have written for the magazine and might like to speak. I think that Alan suggested that Michelle, was it Alan, works in a kind of SEN kind of provision school and might have some kind of perspective on the work that Catherine produces through the magazine, and we'd love to invite any of those people to speak.
Every time I speak to a lot of teachers in special schools as well as in mainstream schools, and there's a demand for content and resources and ideas, because there's such a dearth of that. And I think, you know, it's cliche, but every teacher is a teacher of SEND. You know, there are children with special needs and disabilities in every classroom, and we should know how to teach these children, but sometimes that bit gets a bit lost along the way when we're training. There's not enough time, and certainly there doesn't seem to be as many resources out there as there could be. So it's great to be able to put a bit more information out into the world.
Yes, and for those listeners who might not have had the chance to read your column yet, what would you say is you know, if there's only one thing that they could take away this evening, what is a simple action that teachers could take into their classroom tomorrow to improve inclusion in their setting? That might be a very difficult question.
It is an incredibly difficult question, but it's actually, I'm going to answer it by cheating slightly. So in my first, in issue 12, I talked about inclusive design, and there was a lovely quote from somebody called Susan Goldsman who talks about inclusive design doesn't mean you're designing one thing for all people, you're designing a diversity of ways to participate so that everyone has a sense of belonging. And I love that quote, because it's about saying, you know, we're not just going to have, you know, a child in the corner doing a worksheet over here because they can't access this. It's saying everyone needs to be involved, but we need to provide different ways for them to access it. And I write again in issue 18, and other people have written about universal design for learning, which is gaining traction, started out in the States. And that basically talks about multiple means of engagement, representation, action, and expression. So how we present the material, how children engage with it, and the things that they do, the more ways they can do that and the variety of that means that your classroom will become more accessible. Mm-hmm. So a child who, struggles to write and express themselves in the written language can create an animation, or they can record themselves. And that becomes more accessible. So actually, I think if teachers think about that, then within that, there's so many other things around scaffolding and everything else. But yeah, there's so many different ideas and ways of doing it.
Yeah, and well, I think that's a really useful thing that people can take away today. And I believe there's a article on the Universal Design for Learning framework in our big book of computing pedagogy. So if listeners have got that, or want to download it off the website, that's a really great introduction. Very accessible piece. So I think we had some audience requests to speak.
Yeah, sorry, it's been, I can't believe it's been 5 years since Hello World was first published. Yeah, I've written a few articles and it's been quite a broad range. And one thing I find interesting is you never know what's going to make an interesting article.
Yes.
So one I wrote early on, I wrote a piece about a game I'd created for a lesson, and that was interesting, and that was what you'd expect to write. And then I wrote one about languages and EAL and learning Python. And actually the most recent one I've written was about mental health. So it's sort of such a broad range of different topics that we talk about.
And I think that thing is it, different articles appeal to different people. And we've got such a range of people reading the magazine, brand new teachers, very experienced teachers, researchers, those that are teaching, computing amongst other subjects. So I think that's the wonderful thing about Hello World, having that variety. I loved your piece on building a global educator family in 2017. That was a wonderful piece, really focusing on, making that was all about, community, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which is very much in the ethos of Hello World, and sharing that space, not necessarily to even talk about teaching, but to just share in the stresses of the times of last year during the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, I consider myself very lucky to be part of some of these educator communities. So, when I did Pi Academy, however many years ago it was, and first met Carrie Ann and everyone at Raspberry Pi, it sort of introduced me to this idea of educator communities. I have her to blame for everything that's happened since. For those people who don't know me, I am a former primary school teacher. So I used to teach primary school in the UK, and now I support schools around the world with computing. And it's been sort of quite a journey that's come from this community that I guess Hello World is a big part of.
And Kat blames me for a lot of things, but this community is so much richer for people because of people like Kat. And I think she plays this down, but she is such an important voice and just brings so much to the community. So thank you, Kat, for contributing and the range of articles that you have to Hello World, and not just the articles, but also joining us on the podcast and joining us for this session. It's just so valuable hearing from so many people.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to dash off, unfortunately. I've sort of not stopped yet, so I need to decompress before bed.
No, well, thank you for carving out a bit of time this evening to join us. Thank you, Alan. You got your hand up and wanted to chip in.
I still think a lot of people have great articles within them, but are put off by, how long will it take, and nobody will. And I would really encourage people to consider a partnership with another educator, professional, or two. Certainly, that's really, really helped me when I've written the articles. If I said, Catherine, Nina, Gemma, James, I'm going to write this article, what would you put in the article? It really does help you quite a lot to do that. So if you've wondered about contributing, but you're not quite brave enough, maybe have that conversation. And particularly if you're in a school where there's a high drive on professional development, and you've set one or two performance management appraisal objectives. What you might do is you might partner up with somebody and write something. Just think how good you're going to feel when that comes through your letterbox in print, or if you're printing at home.
Catherine, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I was just going to agree actually that it's really intimidating writing articles. I mean, every deadline I think, this is definitely not good enough. I can't do this because, all these people are reading it. But actually we all have something to say and something to contribute. And I know some of the richest ones I've written probably are the ones where I've brought in some experience of what I've done when I was teaching, or when I've worked with young people, or I've spoken to some teachers about things, and getting that kind of just teacher voice of the diversity of all the people out there who are teaching, computing, and which is what I love about Hello World. Is for me, I know a lot about what's going on in England, but I don't know a great deal about what's going on in Ireland and Scotland and across the water, and and I think that's fabulous to hear all those different perspectives. So yeah, pick up a, well, not a pen, but your keyboard and write something.
Yeah, please don't send handwritten drafts in to me. Yes, and I think that's you say you get this kind of feeling towards the deadline that, oh God, what am I going to write? Or, why don't know if I've got something good enough to say. I think, everyone has a different experience, and other people want to hear about that. If other people want to hear about your ideas that you do every day in your lessons and don't think anything of, it's going to be a big help to somebody out there. And I think the thing to remind everyone is, so many people contact me with article ideas and they say, oh, but, I'm not a writer, I'm a teacher, I'm not a writer. And yes, you are right. If you're a teacher, you're writing all the time. You're writing, feedback, you're writing end of term reports, you're writing lesson plans. That's all you've got to be able to do to write for Hello World. We're not expecting War and Peace. Definitely don't want something that length to edit down. It's all about sharing your experience, and we're here to help with the awful stuff that you can ignore and I can deal with. So if you've got an idea, please, as Alan said, if you want to pair up with somebody, if that makes it a little bit less scary for your first time writing, I would really consider that. And we've got a wonderful insider's guide from Alan coming next month, all about making the most of Hello World. One of those things is writing for the magazine, but of course you can make the most out of Hello World in lots of other ways. I think one of the most interesting things I've seen is how there's sort of reading groups that seem to be popping up. I've seen quite a few in the CAS communities, lots of people reading particularly the big book of computing pedagogy, discussing different sort of sections of it. I absolutely love that idea. I don't know if any listeners are part of those kind of groups. But I think that's a fantastic idea. It's a great way to be making the most of it.
Gemma, I'm curious, because we've talked a lot about contributing, but I don't think we've given anybody, or not certainly in a little while, how do they contribute? Where do they go to kind of pitch an idea? How do they get an idea to you in the first place? And what does that entail? Yes, so we have a form that you fill in at helloworld.cc/write for us. And that's also in the back of the magazine if you haven't got a pen to note that down at the moment. And you basically just fill in the form with your idea. So you don't have to write anything and send off a draft to me. I'd actually prefer it if you just send me the idea that you've got, and then I kind of get in contact and we just have a quick chat over email about your idea, and I'll give some ideas about how you can structure that. So, always there for support. And then, you'll then send me your first draft, and we'll have a little bit of back and forth with me doing some edits and some suggestions. And then very shortly, you'll get a proof that you can have a look at, a little sneak preview before it makes its way into the magazine. And the deadlines are there to sort of work around you. So if you have an idea in January, but you're not ready to write something until November, that's absolutely fine. We know that teachers are busy people. So also don't be put off by that. Just kind of get in touch with me. helloworld.cc/write for us if you're interested. We always want first time contributors. Yes. Alan's just put a little message in
in a group chat that we've got, saying, if you want another 5 years of Hello World, we need you. And that is so true. You guys are the magazine. It wouldn't work without you guys. We need as many people from different teaching communities, different places in the world, to make Hello World as exciting and varied as possible. So yes, do get writing for us.
I was, as we started this chat, Gemma, I was thinking, are we going to be able to fill an hour? And I've just looked at the clock, and it's we've got like 4 minutes of what we sort of planned to say left. So
we should do it again sometime then.
Yeah, absolutely, and it would be really nice to hear from our audience, people that have listened, as to whether you valued this, whether this is something you would like us to repeat, whether this format and forum kind of works for you. So please, again, like, if it's something you enjoyed, let us know either now or follow up with a tweet or something else later on. I think we wanted to end with just a little bit of a time for any further kind of comments, questions, just a time for you to ask us or tell us anything. I can see that we've added Amanda to our speaker roster. So I wasn't sure if Amanda wanted to have the floor for a moment and chip in with any comments, questions, reflections, or words of wisdom. No pressure, Amanda.
Sure. I don't know about words of wisdom, but I'm happy to say hello, and I think I'm probably just going to echo a lot of other people in saying, one, I can't believe it's been 5 years already. So it feels like just yesterday the first issue came out. I think I've really appreciated Hello World magazine because, like other people have said already, teaching computer science, especially feels like in the States, can be kind of isolating right now. There isn't a huge community. There aren't a lot of CS teachers in districts, and at my site, I'm the only one right now, and the class just started this year. So especially this year now, I find myself going back and downloading issues and referencing different articles and trying to make plans for this new class that we're putting together. And so it's been a really, really great resource to have that magazine, so accessible and written by other educators who have done this. And I love that all the articles are, tried and true lessons and strategies and things that I can kind of implement right away.
Thank you, Amanda. And you've also written for the magazine as well, and being in the States, you've received a print copy as well, which is which we mentioned earlier on as well. So if those of you in the States, Yolanda, Amanda, and others, if you wrote an article for every issue, you'd basically be getting a free subscription anyway. So I'm just gonna flag that there. Yolanda, do you want to chip in there?
So yes, I now know how to get a subscription. I'll write for every article. So Gemma, that's going to be, you'll get some notes from me. But what I wanted to say really quickly, and just an echo of everyone, is that I think it is the authenticity and the practicality. And when you have those two elements, teachers and educators, they appreciate it. And so I think that is the most important aspect for me of being a part of the Hello World community is I know that it's authentic, and there's going to be something practical that I can implement in my classroom the next day if I so choose to.
Thank you. That's
very heartwarming.
Heartwarming, absolutely. You stole the words there, Gemma. Yeah, absolutely. It's been an absolute pleasure this evening to hear from so many of our audience, our contributors, and so I think we're going to kind of start to wrap up now. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Gemma for helping me co-host, for Alan and Catherine for joining us and taking time out of their evening to join us as guests this evening, to all of you for listening, and especially those of you who have put your head above the parapet and shared and contributed towards tonight's conversation. And I'm also going to thank an invisible bit of support we've got here. So Nina, who isn't sort of chipping into she's shaking her head because I'm putting her in the spotlight. She's our social media manager, who's done an excellent job kind of promoting and supporting this Twitter Spaces session. So thank you to everybody. And if you want us to run something like this again, please do get in touch and just keep giving us your feedback, and we will keep writing the magazine with you and for you.
And this is now where we all sing happy birthday, isn't it?
We didn't script that bit, Gemma.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure seeing everybody pop up throughout the night.
when might we see issue 18 appear? I got the right
Issue
number?
18 is publishing on the 14th of March. So not long to go now. And yeah, all about cybersecurity. So there are so many fantastic articles coming up, which really looking forward to sharing with you. So keep checking your emails. But yes, 14th of March is when it's due to land.
And I'm just going to plug the podcast, which landed on Monday as well. We had a great conversation with two fantastic contributors in India who did an amazing job printing masks and all sorts of PPE during the pandemic and sort of mobilized the whole community. It's a really fascinating and fantastic conversation. So if you haven't listened to that yet, that's available on your podcast stream. I think that's a great place to end there, Nina. So thank you so much once again. Have a good evening, and that's goodbye from all of us.
Bye.
Bye.